You apologize when someone wrongs you. You defend the person to people who know better. You've cut off anyone who questioned this person. Machiavelli understood something most never see. Control isn't force, it isn't persuasion, it isn't even influence, it's installation. And the manipulator who masters it doesn't just change behavior. They rewrite the entire nervous system until compliance feels like choice. Machiavelli called it installation, not control, not manipulation. Installation, where compliance feels like choice. 7 incisions make it possible. Each cuts deeper. The 7th makes you defend them, to strangers, to family, to yourself, even when you know something's wrong. This isn't theory. This is documented warfare. Intelligence agencies call it rapport exploitation. Cult architects call it thought reform. Romantic predators call it love. Corporate strategists call it culture. Machiavelli called it statecraft. The mechanics are identical. Identify the target's need for significance, inject a flattering identity, create manufactured dependency, then watch them police themselves more brutally than any external force ever could. By the end of this, you'll know the sequence. You'll see who's running it on you, and you'll understand why you defended them yesterday, even though you knew, somewhere beneath the installed narrative, that you were being erased. Manipulation is amateur hour. It's visible. It breaks. A raised voice, a threat, a clumsy demand. These are the tools of someone who doesn't understand the architecture of the human mind. Someone who thinks power is taking when Machiavelli proved 5 centuries ago that real power is giving. Giving someone a story about themselves so compelling, they'll do anything to keep living inside it. Installation is different. It doesn't push, it rewires. It makes the target want the outcome the installer designed so completely that resistance feels like self-betrayal. This is the distinction Machiavelli drew between the prince who rules by fear and the prince who rules by manufactured devotion. Fear requires maintenance, the whip, the dungeon, the constant theater of dominance. But devotion is self-sustaining because the devoted don't obey, they fulfill. And fulfillment feels like freedom, even when it's the most elegant form of captivity ever designed. Commands announce themselves. Do this or else, installations whisper. You're the kind of person who already wanted this. I'm just helping you see what you've always known. Machiavelli watched this in Renaissance courts. Modern psychologists documented it in abusive relationships. The mechanism hasn't changed, only the vocabulary. They don't change your behavior. They change who you think you are. Behavior follows automatically. Machiavelli understood that men don't act from reason, they act from identity. The story they believe about themselves overrides logic, morality, self-interest, everything, which means the manipulator who controls the story controls the man without ever issuing a single command. Watch how it happens. They study you, not casually, forensically. Your insecurities, aspirations, resentments. The version of yourself you perform publicly versus the version you wish existed privately. Then they speak to the private version, not to who you are, to who you could be if the world finally recognized it. You're not like other people. Past tense. Not you could be. You've always been this. They're just the first person perceptive enough to see it. This is the injection. George Simon called it covert flattery, the compliment that doesn't feel like manipulation because it's framed as observation, as if they're discovering a truth rather than installing one. Robert Greene documented it in The Laws of Human Nature. People will do almost anything to protect a flattering self-concept, even when protecting it requires ignoring every warning signal their body sends. Machiavelli saw it in allies who became fanatics. He didn't buy loyalty with gold, he bought it with identity, making men believe they were the kind of people who would never betray him. And that belief became heavier than any contract because breaking it would mean admitting they'd misunderstood themselves. Now watch what happens inside you. Every time you deviate from the installed identity, you feel cognitive dissonance. Wait, I'm supposed to be perceptive. Why am I confused? I must be missing something. Let me trust them again. The cage builds itself. You become its most devoted guard. Machiavelli knew the perfect prison has no walls, only mirrors, and the prisoner spends eternity defending the bars because admitting they're trapped would shatter the reflection. They tell you a secret, something damaging, something that makes them seem vulnerable, broken, even dangerous, but framed as radical honesty, the kind of rawness most people can't handle. This isn't intimacy, this is debt installation. Machiavelli advised this in The Prince. If you want someone bound to you, don't give them gold, give them a secret, because gold can be spent, but a secret creates obligation. And obligation is the currency of control. Here's the mechanism. When someone confesses something deeply personal, your nervous system interprets it as trust. Trust creates an involuntary reciprocity debt. Eric Berne called this the transaction beneath the transaction, intimacy traded like currency. The person who confesses first holds moral authority because now you owe equivalence. But the master doesn't confess randomly. The confession is surgical. Option 1, exaggerated flaw. I've been told I care too much, a weakness that's actually a humble brag, making you admire the trait that will later destroy you. Option 2, small truth, large distraction. They admit being controlling sometimes to hide that they're always calculating, and your relief at their honesty blinds you to the larger architecture. Option 3, manufactured vulnerability. The confession is designed to make you feel protective rather than repelled, so you stop evaluating them critically and start defending them preemptively. Once the confession lands, 3 installations activate simultaneously. You feel special. They don't tell just anyone. You feel responsible. I can't abandon them now. You become complicit. I'm holding their secret, which makes me a partner, and partners don't betray. Gavin de Becker documented this in Predators, the attacker who shares vulnerability to disable the target's threat detection, because a partner won't run even when every instinct screams danger. Machiavelli saw this in statecraft. The ally who has emotionally invested in you will defend that investment more viciously than any paid mercenary, because abandoning you would mean admitting the investment was wasted, and humans protect sunk costs more fiercely than future gains. The controlled confession isn't intimacy. It's a contract you didn't know you signed, and the terms only become visible when you try to leave. This is the one that breaks people. Not because it's complex, because by the time you recognize it, you're chemically dependent on it. Intermittent reinforcement is the mechanism behind every addiction humans have ever developed. Gambling, substances, toxic relationships, social media. It's the unpredictable reward schedule that hijacks dopamine pathways and makes you chase the high long after the lows have become unbearable. Machiavelli never named it, but he practiced it religiously. The prince who alternates between warmth and coldness keeps subjects destabilized, always performing for favor, never certain where they stand. And that uncertainty creates obsessive focus more powerful than any consistent treatment ever could. Here's the sequence. First, consistent reward. Affection, attention, validation. They flood you with presence so intense, it feels like you finally found someone who sees you. Then, withdrawal. No warning. Cold where they were warm. Distant where they were close. Critical where they were affirming. Your nervous system floods with cortisol. The withdrawal isn't just emotional, it's biochemical. Your brain interprets the loss of reward as a survival threat. Then, return. Just as you're breaking. Just as you're spiraling into self-blame. They come back, and the relief is so overwhelming that your brain releases a dopamine surge larger than the original reward, because relief from pain registers more powerfully than baseline pleasure. This is the addiction protocol. You're no longer seeking connection. You're seeking the return of connection after deprivation. That's a different neurological circuit, the same one that makes a gambler pull the lever obsessively, the same one that keeps an addict using despite catastrophic consequences, because maybe this time it'll pay out. Maybe this time they'll stay warm. Lundy Bancroft mapped this in Controllers. The abuser who is occasionally wonderful, not despite the cruelty, but because of it, because the intermittent kindness makes the victim believe the real person is the kind one, and the abuse is an aberration fixable through better performance. Machiavelli saw this with allies and rivals. Never be predictably kind or predictably cruel, because predictability makes you replaceable. But the prince who keeps everyone guessing becomes the center of every calculation. The variable everyone else's behavior revolves around. If you've ever obsessed over someone who is only sometimes good to you, you're not weak, you're installed. And the person running the protocol knows exactly what they're doing. They don't lock the door, they make everywhere else feel empty. This is controlled isolation, one of the most elegant installations because it feels like depth. Like you found someone who understands you better than anyone ever has. When actually what's happened is they've systematically devalued every other reference point until their version of reality is the only one that feels solid. Machiavelli understood this in territorial control. The prince who wants absolute power doesn't just conquer land, he makes the populace dependent on him for meaning, identity, purpose, so that imagining life without him feels like imagining breathing without air. Watch the sequence. First, identification of dissatisfaction. Your friends don't really get you, do they? Does your family actually support your dreams or just tolerate them? You seem drained after spending time with them. They don't invent these frustrations, they amplify them. Second, validation of separation. You deserve people who see your value. Real connection is rare. Most people are just performing. What we have, most people will never understand. Notice the shift. They're not telling you to cut people off. They're validating a boundary you were already considering, making it feel like your clarity, your self-respect, your evolution. Third, positioning as alternative. You can be yourself with me. I actually hear you. This is what real intimacy feels like. Now your world narrows, not through force, through contrast. Everything outside the relationship starts feeling hollow, performative, exhausting, so you voluntarily retreat into the only space that feels real. George Simon called this covert isolation. The manipulator doesn't forbid contact with others, they make contact with others feel pointless, and the target withdraws willingly, even gratefully, believing they're finally prioritizing depth over shallow connection. This is how cults operate. This is how totalitarian states manufacture consent. This is how abusive relationships persist across decades. The victim isn't physically trapped, they're perceptually trapped, unable to imagine a reality outside the one the controller constructed. Machiavelli saw this in statecraft. The prince who controls the narrative controls the kingdom, and the subject who has internalized that narrative will defend it more brutally than any hired enforcer, because attacking it would mean attacking their own sense of what's real. If one person has become your primary reality, ask, did the world actually shrink, or were you taught to see it that way? That's the fourth incision, and it makes leaving feel like suicide. You start noticing inconsistencies, the lies, the patterns. So you confront them. That's when the fifth installation activates. Gaslighting isn't lying. Lying is simple. Say something false, hope they believe it, move on. Gaslighting is reality distortion, making you doubt not just the facts, but your capacity to perceive facts. So you stop trusting your own mind and begin outsourcing your sense of reality to the person manipulating you. Machiavelli never used the term, but the principle saturates the prince. If you control the narrative, you control the kingdom. And the subject who doubts their own perception can be made to believe anything. Here's the mechanism. You present evidence. You said 6, it's 9. You didn't text. They don't deny the facts. They deny the significance of the facts. I thought you'd understand. I got held up. Why are you making this a big deal? The conversation has shifted. You're no longer discussing whether they were late. You're discussing whether you're reasonable for caring. This is the pivot. They've moved from the event to your reaction, and if you follow them into that terrain, you're now defending your right to be upset instead of holding them accountable for the original violation. Or they rewrite the timeline. I said I'd try to be there. I never guaranteed it. Did they? You can't remember anymore. Maybe they did. Maybe you misheard. Maybe you're being unfair. This is the fog. Gavin de Becker called this the pre-incident indicator. Your intuition screams danger, but the manipulator has trained you to distrust intuition, so you override the alarm and walk deeper into the trap. Lundy Bancroft documented this in Controllers. They don't just rewrite history, They rewrite your memory of history, so every time you try to hold them accountable, you end up apologizing for doubting them. Machiavelli would recognize this as the ultimate statecraft. The prince who makes subjects doubt their own perceptions doesn't need dungeons or armies, because the subjects imprison themselves, constantly second-guessing, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to align their reality with his narrative. If you've ever ended an argument feeling wrong, even though you know you were right, you've been gaslit, and the installation is nearly complete. They create the disaster, then rescue you from it. And in that rescue, you bond to them so intensely, you forget they engineered the catastrophe in the first place. This is the manufactured crisis, one of the most elegant moves in the installation playbook, because it converts trauma into loyalty. Machiavelli saw this in warfare. The general who creates chaos then offers terms that look generous compared to annihilation, but are actually submission disguised as mercy. Watch the pattern. Something destabilizes. Financial emergency, social conflict, sudden crisis that leaves you vulnerable, confused, desperate. In that moment, they step in, calm, capable, solutions-oriented. They don't just help, they become the only help, the only person who didn't abandon you, the only one who showed up when it mattered. Your nervous system floods with relief, gratitude, bonding. This is trauma bonding, the neurological phenomenon where the person who saves you from danger becomes fused to your sense of safety, even if they created the danger to begin with. Here's the secret. The crisis wasn't random. They engineered it. Maybe they sabotaged other relationships so you'd have no one else to turn to. Maybe they encouraged financial recklessness, then rescued you with a loan that creates dependency. Maybe they escalated a conflict with a third party, then positioned themselves as your protector. The mechanism is identical. Create instability, become the anchor. Robert Cialdini documented this in Influence, the escalating commitment trap, where each small compliance makes refusing the next request psychologically costly, because refusal would mean admitting the previous compliance was a mistake, and humans protect consistency more fiercely than truth. Machiavelli saw this in alliances. The prince who saves a weaker state from destruction earns loyalty more binding than any treaty, because the saved state now owes its existence, and that debt becomes the foundation of permanent subjugation. If you feel like you owe someone because they helped you through crisis, ask, did the crisis exist before they arrived, or did it escalate after? That's the sixth incision, and it makes you believe survival requires them. This is the final installation, the masterpiece, because by the time it activates, you're no longer the victim. You're the evangelist. The missionary effect is when the installed becomes the installer's most passionate defender, protecting the system that controls them with more intensity than the original architect, because their identity is now so fused with the manipulation that attacking it would mean destroying themselves. Machiavelli saw this as the ultimate achievement of power. The prince who has truly conquered doesn't need spies or soldiers, because the populace has internalized his worldview so completely they enforce it themselves, believing submission is freedom. Here's how it works. After months or years of the previous 6 incisions, something shifts. You stop resisting, not from weakness, from internalization. Their beliefs become your beliefs. Their goals become your goals. Their language becomes your language. Now, when someone outside the system, an old friend, family member, concerned stranger, tries to point out what's happening, you don't thank them. You defend the manipulator. You don't understand them like I do. They've been through so much, they're just protecting themselves. You're judging without knowing the full story. Notice what's happening. You're not being forced to defend them. You want to. Because if they're the villain, what does that make you? Complicit, foolish, weak. Your ego can't accept that, so instead you rewrite the narrative. They're misunderstood, you're enlightened, everyone else is too shallow or judgmental to see the truth. This is the missionary effect. You've become the installation's immune system, attacking anyone who threatens it. This is how cults replicate. This is how authoritarian regimes get ordinary citizens to police each other, not through fear, but through identity fusion, where the subject's sense of self becomes indistinguishable from the ideology. This is how abusive relationships persist across generations. The victim doesn't just stay, they recruit, teaching their children the same distorted reality, believing they're passing down wisdom when they're actually installing the same prison. Machiavelli understood this as the pinnacle of statecraft. True power isn't making people obey, it's making them want to obey so desperately they'll punish anyone who questions whether obedience was ever necessary. If you've ever defended someone to others even though alone you have doubts, if you felt compelled to protect someone's reputation even after they hurt you, you're not loyal, you're installed, and the installation is complete. 7 incisions, 7 installations. Now the reckoning. Don't answer these questions for an audience. Answer them in the part of your mind you don't perform for anyone, the brutal private honesty you barely admit to yourself. 1. Is there someone whose approval feels more essential than your own? 2. Do you change opinions, interests, or behavior to align with one person, then justify it as growth? 3. Have you isolated from people who don't understand your relationship with someone who validates that isolation? 4. Do you end arguments feeling wrong even when factually you were right? 5. Have you defended someone's behavior to others while privately it disturbs you? 6. Is there someone only sometimes good to you, yet you constantly perform to earn the return of that goodness? 7. Do you feel unable to leave a relationship, job, or situation? Not from logistics, but because leaving would mean admitting you were wrong to stay. 3 or more affirmative answers means you're not paranoid, you're compromised. Machiavelli would tell you this: the kingdom that doesn't recognize it's been conquered has already lost, because the occupied populace is easier to rule than the one still fighting. And you can't fight an enemy you can't see. The installation has been running longer than you think, possibly years. Recognition doesn't liberate. Recognition is just the first crack in the foundation, the moment before collapse when you realize the ground beneath you was never solid. Now you choose: rebuild or keep pretending. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. You can't negotiate with an installation. You can't fix it. You can't love it into changing. Installations aren't people. They're systems, and systems don't have empathy. They have incentives, and the incentive of this system is keeping you functional within it. Machiavelli would approach this as warfare, not therapy. You don't debate with the occupying army. You remove it, and removal requires precision, not emotion. Protocol 1. External documentation. Stop trusting your memory. The manipulator rewrote it multiple times. Your memory is compromised evidence. Create a private, encrypted record. What they said, what they did, timestamp, context. No interpretation, just facts. This creates an external reference point outside your mind that can't be gaslit, a reality check your emotions can't override. Protocol 2, re-establish external contact. The isolation was surgical. Reverse it. Reach out to people you distance yourself from, not to apologize, not to explain, just to exist in their presence again. The manipulator made their world feel bigger than reality. You need to rescale reality by surrounding yourself with people who knew you before the installation. Protocol 3, test the installed identity. Remember the identity they injected? You're not like other people. You're the kind of person who sees through things. Test it. Do something that contradicts that identity. Observe your emotional reaction. If it feels like betrayal, like you're letting yourself down, that's not your real self. That's the installed self defending its architecture. Real identity bends. Installed identity shatters. Protocol 4, starve the intermittent reinforcement. This one is brutal. Go no contact or, if impossible, gray rock. Become so boring, unresponsive, emotionally flat that you're no longer a rewarding target. No anger, no sadness, no engagement. The manipulator will escalate. Love bombing, rage, guilt, threats, because you're disrupting the reward cycle they built. Hold the line. Starvation works. Protocol 5, rewrite the narrative. The manipulator gave you a story about who you are. You accepted it because it felt better than uncertainty. Now you write a new one. Not victim, not hero, just a person who was targeted by someone with a system. No shame, No grandiosity, just accurate. Machiavelli would say, "The prince who loses his kingdom doesn't mourn. He studies the mechanisms of defeat and ensures it never happens again." You're not broken, you're installed. And installations can be removed. Here's what happens after extraction. You're never the same. Not because you're damaged, because you're awake. You've seen the machinery. You know how incisions are made. Now you choose. Spend your life afraid of being manipulated again, hyper-vigilant, paranoid, unable to trust anyone because trust once cost everything, or become uninstallable. Not by building walls, by understanding the game so deeply you see moves before they're made. Principle 1, kill the ego's need for external validation. Every installation begins with identity injection. Identity injection only works if you're hungry for someone to tell you who you are. Starve that hunger. Build a self-concept so grounded in your own observation and testing that flattery sounds like noise. Principle 2, treat confession as data, not intimacy. When someone reveals vulnerability, don't rush to reciprocate. Observe. Why this confession? Why now? What does this set up later? Real intimacy builds through consistent behavior over time, not strategic vulnerability drops. Principle 3, recognize intermittent reinforcement in real time. The moment someone warm goes cold, don't chase. Observe the pattern. If the coldness is a test, failing means you don't chase. Passing means you don't notice. Principle 4, maintain external reference points always. Never let one person become your sole reality. Diversify your sources of feedback, affirmation, perspective. The manipulator can only rewrite reality if you let them become the only author. Principle 5, practice the exit test. Regularly ask, if I left this relationship today, what would I lose? If the answer is everything, identity, worldview, sense of safety, you're not in a relationship. You're in an installation. Machiavelli said the prince must always have an exit, a fallback, a kingdom within the kingdom that ensures he's never entirely dependent on any alliance. You are your own kingdom. Build accordingly. You came here suspecting something, maybe someone specific, maybe yourself. Here's the cold truth Machiavelli understood 5 centuries before modern psychology confirmed it. Everyone influences. Every relationship involves persuasion, shaping, negotiation. That's not danger. Danger is installation. When influence becomes architecture, when persuasion becomes dependency, when shaping becomes erasure. The 7 incisions aren't magic. They're mechanics. Mechanics can be reversed if seen clearly. Most people won't reverse them. Most will watch this, feel the tension, recognize someone, then do nothing because doing something means admitting they were wrong, and the ego protects itself more viciously than the body ever could. But you're different. You made it here. That means you value clarity over comfort, truth over performance, reality over the soothing lie. You now know the incisions, you know the installations. You know how to recognize them, resist them, and, if you're honest, how to deploy them. That's the forbidden part, the dangerous knowledge. Because once you see the machinery, you can't unsee it, and the temptation to use it becomes a quiet, persistent whisper in every interaction. Resist that, not because it's immoral, because the installer eventually becomes prisoner of their own system. Constantly managing, maintaining, performing, never able to rest because installation requires perpetual reinforcement. Freedom isn't controlling others. Freedom is being uncontrollable. That's real power, not domination, immunity. Machiavelli wrote The Prince not as a moral guide, but as a reality manual. The cold mechanics of power, influence, control, what actually works versus what people wish worked. This video did the same. You now know what works. The incisions, the installations, how to see them, how to remove them, and how to ensure they never take root again. The installation has been revealed. Once you see the cage, you can never pretend it's a home. The territory is yours now. Navigate accordingly.